friends. Really excited to be here and to introduce somebody to you, Anshuman. Anshuman is a BTech from IIT Bombay, an MBA from Stanford, worked with Google, worked with Deloitte, and now has his own travel website called Mygola.com. And it's quite exciting. And I met Anshuman a few days ago in a dinner at Zinga, and that's how we sort of got together. Really exciting business, so I want to quickly get into it. Anshuman, why don't you talk to us about what Mygola is about?
Sure. Thanks, Rajiv. So Mygola is a simple travel planning service that allows anyone to get a human guide to do all the research for their trip, including planning and including bookings. We've actually already planned more than 10,000 trips to over 80 different countries and get tremendous love from our users. We've been featured in the New York Times, MSNBC, and a bunch of places. And I think fundamentally what prompted us to go in this direction is I was at Google looking at travel partnerships that Google had and looked very closely at the business models of the big guys like the Expedias of the world, and realized that there were two ends of the spectrum. On one end you had the Expedias who were trying to build their own walled garden, and the entire perspective was to push users to play around in that walled garden until they got to the point of making a transaction. On the other end of the spectrum, we had all these innovative startups coming up who would do one thing really, really well. They might, for example, predict how late your flight is going to be, or they might tell you which room to actually get in a certain hotel. But all of them realize that the way to make money in this business is to actually tack on a booking or a transaction component to it. And therefore, very quickly, the value proposition would dilute out. So travel is an old category. Travel is also legendary in the sense that people have been completely frustrated by the experience that they have online. So we said, well, what if you actually step back for a second and imagine a service where you have the high touch and personalization that only a human can provide. So that when you ask a question like, I'm going to be in Amsterdam and I have 2 kids with me, should I get a stroller or not? That person would understand what you're talking about. But at the same time, that human has to be powered by all the richness of the web that has happened in the past 10 years. So that's what we have built. We're basically a bunch of geeks who have built this amazing technology in the engine at the back. But at the same time, we have this large and growing everyday workforce of travel enthusiasts spread around the world who actually pick up all your trip requests and do all the research using our platform.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you're obviously going to be a $1 billion IPO in the next couple of years, or aim into that. Hey, wonderful. So in terms of the geekiness and the technology engine behind this, I was quite intrigued about a couple of things. You said you're adding more than 100 guides every week to your ecosystem right now, right? And the other thing about this is that you get paid by the user who is asking the queries, as in the consumer who is asking the queries, which is very different from your traditional business model. So do you want to tell me a little bit about how this engine is configured and why these two things work for you?
Sure. So let me talk about the back end, the engineering, the engine first. So what we pride ourselves in is basically we call ourselves like the Robocop. So Robocop was 90% technology, 10% human, and therefore made him a great cop. Similarly, what we've done is that at the back end, we have built a lot of technology that aggregates about 3,000 different sources, very high quality sources like the New York Times, the Guardian, and lots of travel forums, etc. And takes all that unstructured data, conversations, articles, etc., and converts it into structured entities. So for example, we'll automatically find all kinds of cafes that have been recently recommended in any of these places. However, we think that 90% technology can only get you that far. You actually need that human layer of judgment on top. And that's where the operation, the guide recruitment part of it actually becomes really important. So we basically built a platform where anyone in the world can sign up to become a guide for any destination. They'll go through about 8 hours of online training, all self-serve, all automatic. And at the end of it, they start answering questions. And they use our platform to actually answer those questions and research them. They don't go out on the web. And I think the interesting thing about what we do from the back end is that these guides, as we call them, are primarily providing editorial function. They're not researching necessarily completely from whole cloth, but they're actually looking at a bunch of recommendations that we throw at them and then decide, well, it seems like Rajiv is going with kids, therefore for him this particular thing might make more sense. And that's, I think, what's the interesting thing there. And we have about 1,000 guides now, and we're adding about 100 a week now. So we hope to actually make this a very large ecosystem where there'll be lots of travelers on one side and lots of guides providing one-on-one service to them.
Yeah, so a guy with a child, vegetarian like me, for instance, would perhaps find a lot of value in the website, really.
Absolutely. I think that's been one of our biggest motives, that all travel is actually very idiosyncratic. All of us travel slightly differently. And the web has actually not done a very good job in taking all those nuances into account.
Yeah, so they are trying to do the lowest common denominator approach on everything.
Exactly.
I think that's a great report. Tell me one more thing on this business front. I read somewhere, or you were talking to me about how well you were leveraging Twitter for your business. You said half of your business actually comes from Twitter.
That's right.
Is that right? Tell me a little bit more about how you do it. I mean, that's a very interesting, how many people know how to make sense out of Twitter? I mean, apart from obviously spreading 140 words of nonsense around,
I think I'm glad you brought that up. I think Twitter has always, or at least most often, been used as a broadcast medium when it actually is not. And very early on we discovered that travel is something that people actually talk very passionately about on Twitter. And they might be talking about trips that they've just taken, but they often talk about trips they're about to take. So what we have done is that we've realized that people are asking for suggestions from their followers, and how many times does that actually give you something back in return? So we've written a program that automatically goes out and finds everyone who's planning a trip and talking about it on Twitter.
Wow.
And then we have a semi-automated way, and I think the semi part is really, really important. We have a semi-automated way of getting back to them and say, hey, it looks like you're going to be in Berlin and you need a place to stay. What kind of budget do you have? And people love the fact that for them it's just a tweet that gives them the kind of research that we do back to them. So what happens is that they come in, they look at their research, they're completely wowed by it. You should look at our Twitter page to see how many rave reviews we get. And given that this is a vocal audience, they go back and retweet everything that we've said. And that gets us more users.
Wonderful.
So Twitter is actually a
They get a referral network as well on that.
Absolutely.
I think that's quite cool. The last question really, Anshuman, and I know you have to go, is basically what about your personal journey? What kind of things? You said you started your first business whilst you were at IIT Bombay a long time ago. So what's your personal journey been like?
Sure.
What motivates you? What's it that you're looking to do?
Yes, I've actually always been an entrepreneur with obviously a healthy respect for large companies when they're well run. So I started my first company while I was at IIT. We actually raised venture money. We sold that a year and a half later. And then eventually, last one I was at Google. I had been actually looking at opportunities. But to be honest, we were pregnant at that time. And we were living in New York. We had a great life, and my thinking was that, well, now we're going to have a baby, so I need to become responsible and have a steady job and stuff like that. And then our daughter was born, and I think within the first 2 weeks we had this moment of epiphany where we realized that, wait a second, our daughter does not care which part of the world we live in. She doesn't care whether we live in a high-rise apartment in Manhattan or a small apartment somewhere in Bangalore. So why aren't we taking all the risk right now? She probably doesn't have any say in that for the next 4 years. So let's go crazy for the next 4 years. So my wife and I quit our jobs immediately. We actually moved back to India and we started this company. It's been a very fun journey so far.
Wow. And anyway, best of luck to the $1 billion IPO, and hopefully you'll remember us once you've reached those stratospheric heights. Thank you very much, Anshuman.
Thank you. I appreciate it.